Hey y'all, Trip Harrison here on the beautiful Outer Banks of North Carolina with our video series Music Theory Bites. And by bites, we don't mean sucks. We mean eat it in bites. Use it in bites, a little bit at a time, like the elephant in the room. You just eat a little bit of it as you need it. And we're going to focus some of that energy on chords and how to make your playing go from mediocre to really sounding thick and rich. This first video in the series is a primer for those who have little to no chord experience. So if you already are playing some basic chords, playing at church or playing with a group, and you just want to thicken up what you're doing, you'll probably want to skip past this video because it's very much an introduction to major and minor chords and augmented and diminished and very basically from scales. So if you're past that, go ahead and go to the next video. We'll see you there. From Piano Simply, I'm Trip Harrison. Let's get going with the lesson. In order to assure that we're all on the same page, I'm going to cover some very, very basic things extremely quickly. All of music is based on two basics, notes and rhythm. When I say all of music, I mean conventional Western Hemisphere music. And those two elements are very simple to put together. We're going to start with notes, and this particular video is a quick explanation of how those notes will combine together to form chords. Chords are combinations of three or more different notes played at the same time. So how do we arrive at these combinations? I mean, with 12 different notes, we've got C and C sharp and D sharp and so forth and so on. Before I repeat, I've got 12 different ones there. And if chords are combinations of a minimum of three of those, there are hundreds of combinations. But the good news is that we don't concern ourselves with some of the more fringe chords. We're going to stay with some primary ones. So I'm going to start off with the explanation of how chords are formed, and I'm going to go through it quickly. This is a video that you can review as many times as you need to. So we're going to use the keyboard, the piano, because it's super easy to show you. We're going to start with the easiest way to demonstrate it, which is in the key of C, meaning that we're going to deal with the white keys primarily. So the first thing we're going to do is learn what a scale is. Now, I know you're thinking, oh, you said no scales. And it's only to get a bearing on where the notes are that we'll need for the chords. So the easiest way to present this in the beginning is to determine, first of all, what our primary note is in any chord. Any chord or any scale is named after the primary note in that chord or scale, and it will definitely be one of the components of that scale or chord. For example, if I say, hey, let's play a G chord right there, I know at least one of the notes in that chord will be the note G. If I say, hey, let's do this in B flat, I know at least one of the notes in that chord will be the note B flat. So we've got one down, and if we're looking for the simplest chords, which are triads, remember I said three or more different notes played together constitute a chord. If I am going to play a B flat chord, I know that the note B flat will be at least one of the three notes in that chord, and I will then be able to figure out the other two, and then I'll be all set. So we're going to back it up a step. Before chords, we have scales, and scales are simply notes played in a sequence, not all together, that range in length. Some scales are 5 notes, some scales are 7 notes, some scales are 12 notes. We're going to concern ourselves with the most common ordinary scale in the world, and it's the major scale, the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do scale. Now, I can start that scale anywhere on the piano. I can start it on a black key here, which is the A flat or the G sharp. I can start it on a B. I can start it on an F sharp here. The problem is that to make it sound like do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, it's going to involve interchanging a lot of black keys and white keys. The easiest way to show it on a piano is with all white keys. So if I'm going to play a scale, which is the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do scale, that's called a major scale, and it should sound like the song. So we're going to start with the C because it's a C scale. Remember that the root of a scale or the root of a chord is going to be the note that the chord or scale is named after. So if I'm going to play a C scale, it's going to start with a C. All right, so then how do I find the other notes, the re, fa, sol, la, ti, do, all that stuff? So what I do is I go forward and I'm going to do some counting. And when I do some counting, it's to find additional notes in the scale. And the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do scale is the major scale, and it has a certain formula. Now remember, on the keyboard, on the piano, any keyboard instrument, when I or change notes from one note to the next note, I go a certain distance. And the distances on piano are measured in steps and half steps. Any note that is immediately adjacent to the note that I'm playing at the moment, in this case it's C. So what are my immediate neighbors? Well, I have this key here, and not this one because there's one in between there. It happens to be a black key. So we've got an immediate neighbor here, an immediate neighbor there. If I were to move to any one of those immediate neighbor keys, that's a distance of 1/2 step. So from here to here is a half step. Obviously, if I move two of those, and if I move from here to here, it will be 2 half steps, or we also refer to that as 1 whole step or 1 step. Using those distances, we can now find the notes for the do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do major scale. Here's the formula. It's W, W, H, W, 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 H. You might be thinking, what does that mean? Well, we're going to start with the root note. So if I say, let's play the C scale, you know we're going to start with a C. And if W represents whole or a whole step, or 2 half steps, our second note will be to the right, and all these movements are going to be to the right or upward. So a whole step up from C is not going to be here, it's going to be here. That's D. So we have whole, whole, we have another whole. So we're going to move to the right again. That's a half step. This is a whole step. So now I've got this note, and this note, and this note. Remember, these movements are from the note where we landed. So whole, here's root, whole, whole, and the next letter in our acronym is H, half, a half step. So that just means to the immediate next note to the right, which happens to be right here. And then we've got 3 W's and an H to finish it out. So if we're on this note now, write that down. That's an F. And I'm going to move forward. That's a half step. That's a whole step. So now all my notes that I've found so far are, all right, now I'm going to go forward another whole step to A, and I'm going to go forward another whole step to B, and then a half step, which is the next immediate neighbor to the right, which is going to be C. So if I start with C and go whole, whole, half step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step. If I do that, that will give me that familiar that we're used to hearing, okay? That's important to know, and now you've learned it, and we don't have to go back to that anymore. Here's some common, very commonly used chords. The first one is called a major chord. And remember, we call these triads because these simplest chords are made up of exactly 3 notes. That's the minimum to get into the chord club, and that's what we're going to stay with for just a moment. So the way we form a major chord, which is the most common type of 3-note chord, is by playing at the same time the first and the third and the 5th note of the scale. So if my scale, as we've learned, is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then 1 again. If I take the first note of that scale, the third note of that scale, and the 5th note of that scale, and play them together, that's called a chord, a major chord. This is a C major chord. How do I know it's C? Well, that's the root. That's the note where we started. That's the note the chord is named after, so that's a C chord. It's a first and a third and a 5th note of the scale. All right? There are other types of triads. There is one triad type called a minor, and it's usually indicated in a piece of music, as you'll see on the video now, in the case of C, it would have a C and a little m, a lowercase m beside it. That indicates minor. And any minor chord is where we arrive at the notes by playing exactly like a major chord, but we take that third note, the one that's the third step of the scale, so C, D, E, and we lower that note, which means to the left, 1/2 step. Well, immediately adjacent notes are a half step. So it means a C minor chord would be the combination of C and the E lowered a half step to that E flat and then the G. And it's a different sound. They say minor chords are sort of darker and a little more somber, maybe sad, maybe scary, some people say, but it's certainly not a skipping through the tulip field sound. It's a darker sound. And so it's made, again, with the first, the flatted or lowered third, and the fifth, okay? So that's the second type of triad. So we can do that with any chord. We can play an F minor, we can play a G minor, we can figure all of that out as long as we have the basic. That's why scales are usually taught first, because as long as we have the basic understanding of scales, we can figure out chords very, very easily. There are other types of chords that are just 3 notes. There's one called the augmented, which is where we play the first note of the scale, the third note of the scale, back to the original one, and the fifth note of the scale, but the fifth note of the scale is raised up 1/2 step. So the immediate neighbor, so that's a very edgy sort of like at that moment in a Western when you're not sure who's going to shoot first. That's what that is. And the fourth type of chord that's played, that's a triad, is where I play my first and my third and my fifth note of the scale, and I take not the root. The root can't change, otherwise the name of the chord will change. So that has to stay the same. So what I'm going to do is take my third note and fifth note, and I'm going to lower, which is to the left, each of those to the next adjacent key. So now I've got C and E flat and G flat. All right, and that's called a diminished chord. Okay, now all those chords, the major, the minor, the augmented, and diminished, are written in our music with the symbols that you saw on the screen while I was playing them and showing them to you on the piano. And they are chords that are really add a certain something to music and make it a little bit more thick sounding and professional sounding. But where the fun begins is when we can start adding notes to our triads and having chords that contain 4 notes and 5 notes and 6 notes and all that sort of thing. And it gets really rich and really beautiful. So that's where we're going to start on the next video. I just wanted to do this primer for those who had not had a chance to review or remember chord information that they learned before. So remember, we're going to stay in the key of C, and we're going to base our chords that we're going to learn on the C scale, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, and C. We'll see you in a while. Listen, like and subscribe to this channel if you would, please, because this is an effort that's culminated after years of planning, and I'm excited to bring music down to the level where anyone who's had an experience before but lost interest will now be able to pick it up, because I'll make it as exciting as I can. I'm Trip Harrison. Hurry up to the next video. We'll see you there.